Coming to you from Studio A at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. It's bulb planting time, so use your tulips and speak to me. It's the Gardening Simplified show with Stacey Hervella. Our engineer and producer, videographer, photographer, Adriana Robinson, and me, Rick Weist. Well, Stacey, thank you. I love bulbs. I love fall-planted bulbs that bloom in spring. And at some point, we'll talk about spring-planted bulbs, usually tubers or rhizomes that you dig up in fall on another show. But these are the fall-planted bulbs, and what a history they have. I think I've mentioned on the show before that my parents survived the hunger winter of 1944-45 in the Netherlands and ate tulip bulbs to stay alive. Of course, there was also tulip mania in the 1600s, where investors lost track of rational expectations and then realized they were holding an irrationally priced asset, tulip bulbs, and there was, of course, a tulip bulb market bubble and crash. An amazing story if you've never read about this story. Lots of fun to read, and we'll put a link on the website from Investopedia. It's an example that's still used today by investment experts.
It was a doozy.
It was a doozy. Boy, you summed it up beautifully. I used a lot of words to get to that point. You did it with one word, doozy. All right, so today is planting bulbs in fall as easy as dig, drop, done. That's how the industry promotes flower bulbs. And by the way, there's a website. We'll give you that link too at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, digdropdone.com. But is it as easy as dig, drop, done? They have a personality quiz that you can take. I've taken the personality quiz, which tells you what kind of flower bulb you are.
Oh, so what was your result?
I'm afraid to say.
Oh, no, I didn't take it, so I can't share mine, but I will.
Muscari grape hyacinth.
Oh, well, that's a wonderful plant.
That was my reaction. Oh, it's an invasive plant.
Well, but it's darling. And you like blue.
Well, it says if you live a life of abundance, never settling for simple or plain, you're in company with good friends, you like to breathe life into a party, like to socialize, that sort of thing, then you're a muscari. So anyhow, that was my... Take the quiz, okay? And we'll have the link there for you at the website. Okay, through the years of planting bulbs in fall, I've learned these are the key elements. Number one, drainage. Drainage is super important.
It's key. I mean, all the areas where bulbs are native to are mountainous areas with really good drainage and typically very dry in the summer.
Bingo. Central Asia, Iran, or Persia. As early as the 10th century, they came to Europe. Daffodils from northern Africa. So yes, these dry areas. By the way, fritillaria is one of my favorite fall planted bulbs, deer and rabbit resistant. When I was in the Netherlands this past spring, they were just gorgeous in beds. I took all kinds of pictures of them. But fritillaria is one of my favorites. Fritillaria is not something you have with your coffee at a donut shop. It's a bulb that you put in the ground in fall, also known as Crown Imperial.
Yes,
a favorite.
The big tall one is Crown Imperial. I have never met a fritillaria I didn't like. I don't think they exist. They are marvelous. The checkered lily, with the little, looks like it's checkered spotted.
I love checkered lily.
I adore, and the Crown Imperial for many years I was just kind of like, eh. Then one year I found some on the clearance rack and I planted them and I adore them. They are so fascinating, and you lift up those little flowers and they have these huge, like pea-sized nectaries in them that are just glistening. Oh, they're beautiful. I love them.
Fantastic. I love the way you describe that. And by the way, if you write a book, Stacey, that should be the title of your book. I've never met a fritillaria I didn't like.
It's a mouthful, but it's accurate.
Planting depth, also super important. Now, generally, they recommend planting a bulb 2 times its height in depth. So if a tulip bulb is 2 inches high, they recommend planting it 6 inches deep. I recommend planting them deeper. You get more life out of the bulbs. I've planted them as deep as a foot or more, upside down. In other words, where I didn't put the pointy side up. When spring comes, they still work their way to the surface.
They do work their way to the surface. It's best if you can, point it with the right side up, but sometimes it's not always so clear depending on the bulb. And some bulbs, it's even impossible really to tell which is the right side up. Something like Anemone blanda, which another one of my favorites. I adore that plant. If you can't tell which end is up, plant it on its side.
You're so right. Anemone has to be on that list. It's just gorgeous. Chicken wire is your friend. Rodents like to dig up bulbs, so when I plant bulbs, I dig the hole to the depth I need, put a little chicken wire in the bottom of the hole, put the bulbs in, start to refill the hole, fold the chicken wire over, and I'm good to go.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and the bulbs will grow right through the chicken wire.
Oh, yeah, no problem there.
It's a lesson in photosynthesis. Next spring, after they're done blooming, allow that foliage to absorb the sunlight until it yellows. It will re-energize the bulb. It's a great companion with plants like Virginia, magnolias, hellebores, lilacs, forsythias in combination. And for those people who struggle with deer, my top 4 list is fritillarias, alliums, right?
Yep, definitely.
Dutch iris, and daffodils.
Oh, yeah. Can't go wrong with those. I have them all. The deer have never touched them. Rabbits, sometimes, but not the daffodils.
Now, tulips are great for forcing in containers, or you're going to have to provide protection in spring because they're like candy, too.
They are, and if the deer don't get them, the squirrels will. That's what happened when I tried to have some tulips for forcing. I put them outside to get the cold treatment, and then I was planning to bring them in, and then I brought them in, and nothing happened. Why? Because the squirrels raided them.
That's frustrating. That's frustrating.
Yeah, so it goes. What can you? They're delicious to them.
They're delicious. Now, all in all, bulbs to me are just like magic. They're like magic. And if you take, for example, a tulip bulb with a sharp knife and just cut it right down the middle, you can actually see the tiny little flower in there. It's fascinating to see. So it's just this orb of potential ready to bloom in spring. I do recommend feeding when you put the bulbs in the ground. The feeding isn't necessarily for next spring, but it's for future years. And we want the bulbs to root well in the soil below the frost line before spring arrives. But like I said, it's magic. So here comes a limb, a Rick. Spring blooms are for me a focus. Hyacinths, daffodils, and crocus. Next spring, I'll admire tulips while sipping on mint juleps, a botanical hocus pocus. I have tricks up my sleeve, amazed by what bulbs achieve. Easier than a rabbit from a hat, I'm a wizard of my habitat. In magic, I believe.
It's so true because you're out there on some, cold, crummy fall day.
Yeah.
You got all these bulbs and you're putting these just lumpy brown things in the ground, and you kind of have the sense, okay, I know what a daffodil looks like. But the difference between those days when you plant and that time when they emerge, it's amazing that just that small investment in time and effort, it pays off for years if you pick your bulbs well. Years and years you'll have those bulbs coming up every single year, and then you'll say, hey, remember that crummy fall day back in 2023 when I planted those? Now it's, 2033 or beyond, and they're still coming up.
It's magic. That's what it is. It's magic. A great thing to add to your portfolio. Now, as an investment. Now, don't forget the minor bulbs. Minor bulbs are a favorite because they don't take much care. They come back year after year. Generally a small size bulb, and the flowers tend to be miniature too, so you plant them in swaths. But Siberian squill, grape hyacinths, miniature narcissus, snowdrops, galanthus, winter aconite, crocus, glory of the snow, the anemones that you mentioned, and I know another one that you love, and that is Iris reticulata, the little ones.
Love it. Yep, I have a bunch of them, and they're just so tidy and neat. And unlike some other bulbs that maybe don't age gracefully, kind of start getting a little ratty. I'm looking at you, daffodils. You're worth it, but by the time, May rolls around, you're a little like, I'm done with the daffodils. Not so with the reticulated iris. They really just remain really elegant and interesting, even as their foliage grows out.
Well, if you can take a shot at daffodils, I can take a shot at hyacinths. Bear in mind that if you're planting hyacinths, it makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Many people, at least 50% of people, get a skin dermatitis, itchy, awful feeling from handling hyacinths.
Just from handling the bulb?
Yes. So wear gloves if you're planting hyacinths. They're kind of polarizing, like cilantro. You go to the spring garden shows and they have hyacinths everywhere, and some people love it and some people are like overpowered by it. So
I'm in the love camp.
There you go. See? So it's polarizing. Anyhow, that's it for bulbs. Make sure you put some in the ground this fall. And coming up next, plants on trial. Let's see what magic Stacey has to unveil for us. That's coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. On the break, Adriana and myself took the opportunity to take the bulb personality test, and not unlike Rick, I personally do not agree with my result. My result was a tulip, and tulips are okay.
They're colorful.
But that's all they are. To me, that's all they are. They're just colorful. They don't have like a lot of like space in them. I have some species tulips, some real small ones that I do enjoy. And I just, to me, they're just not the most interesting of the bulb because all they are is colorful. I like some things that, are a little bit more interactive. But it says tulips are for you. Your answers indicate that the tulip is a perfect match for your personality. Wrong. When it comes to what you believe in, you stand tall, and your understated elegance is perhaps your most striking characteristic. Among the most popular bulbs, tulips look great no matter where you plant them. So, Adriana, what was your result?
So my result, kind of the opposite of yours, is Alliums. So the versatility with Alliums, though. Can't beat it. I exit out of the article before I could read what it says about me, but I assume it's pretty good.
Yeah, these Alliums are awesome.
Yeah.
As a photographer, a videographer, I could see Alliums.
I mean, I love Alliums, so maybe it doesn't match my personality, but it does match my gardening style.
Yeah,
so, I'm glad you got that result. You deserve it.
Thanks, Stacey. And you can be whatever bulb you want to be.
And that's the whole point, because I'm sure they have us take the quiz only to stay on the website longer and reduce their bounce rate.
Oh, that's true. If we take it multiple times, even if we answer the same, we might just get a different one, randomly. Now, last week we were talking about scooping up some fall bargains. And I'll tell you, fall bargain bulbs, I am there for it. That is my absolute favorite. And I would say probably 75% of my garden is bulbs that I've gotten on sale.
I have a story on that I got to quickly mention. I was digging bargain bulbs in my backyard one night, and I had on one of those it was in December, had one of those warm stocking caps on over my face. I had a pickaxe in my hand. I'm out there in the moonlight digging holes in my backyard. My neighbor looked at me really odd, never said anything, and a month later he moved. So to this day, I think he thinks I'm a serial killer or something. But the bulbs were just like me, 75% off. So I had to plant them.
That's how it goes. And I think, we talked a lot about how much we love bulbs, and it's really just the beginning of bulb planting season here in September. Bulb planting season does go well into December if it must. I have planted bulbs Thanksgiving weekend plenty of times myself. They will be fine. Get them in the ground. So if you don't worry, you don't have to rush out and get your bulbs if you're not ready to, although you do get the best selection if you start early. Right. But I'm happy to pick up whatever's left at the end of the season. And that's where most of my reticulated iris came from, because I think people don't realize how fabulous they are. And then you plant them and you're in the money. So
you're preaching to the choir. I'm Dutch.
where all the bulbs are from. So Shrubs and Bulbs. Have you ever heard this before? Someone that I know, they said, you know what? Like perennials are just getting too much work for me. From now on, it's just Shrubs and Bulbs. And I think they make such a great combination because they're both some of the lowest maintenance, highest reward plants that you can get. You really don't have to work hard to get a great display. So of course, for Plants on Trial today, I needed to pick a shrub that is a great bulb companion. And the plant that I picked is one that we've offered for a long time, but I have only personally recently truly fallen in love with it when I added it to my own garden and witnessed how incredibly beautiful and unique it is. And it is lemony lace elderberry.
I love this plant, and as a fabulous copywriter, Stacey, describe to us what the plant looks like in spring.
So it's
in your mind.
In my mind. Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting because it flowers before the foliage comes out, which is known as flowering naked. And so the flowers come out, there's no leaves on the stems. And then shortly after the leaves do start to emerge, and they have this kind of like super lacy, flushed with red look, and they emerge. And by the time it's fully leafed out in, say, mid-May or so, it looks like a Japanese maple.
Yeah.
It looks so much like a Japanese maple, but it's far less expensive and much easier to grow. Japanese maples, are not the hardiest plants, whereas lemony lace elderberry is hardy down to USDA Zone 3. So if you live in a colder climate and love Japanese maples, but you can't grow them, this is such a nice choice. But to go back to how it plays nicely with bulbs, so you have that all of these pretty white flowers coming out, and this foliage emerges with this yellow color that's all just edged in this dark red color, and it looks truly interesting and elegant. And in my garden, I have it planted behind a planting of hyacinths, which I know is not, thank goodness you didn't get hyacinth as a result on the bulb quiz.
Yeah.
And these were hyacinths that I got on sale. And, a lot of people, I think they don't have good luck with hyacinths year after year, but our soil here is so well drained that I have excellent survival, and they still come back and flower really nice and full. But it's a color combination that I just picked up on sale, and it's lavender, purple, peach, and white. And so this combo is in front of my lemony lace elderberry, which, I have to confess, I didn't plan it that way. It's just where I had space to put my lemony lace. And then this season, when I saw that combination for the first time this past spring, I was like, whoa, I look like a genius. I love when this happens.
It's magic.
It is magic. So it's a really unique elderberry. Now, I think when most people hear Proven Winners elderberries, they're probably thinking of black lace elderberry. Amazing plant, one that has been in the Proven Winners Color Choice line of flowering shrubs for years. Now, lemony lace is a very different plant. It is still an elderberry, but it is Sambucus racemosa, whereas the regular black elderberries are Sambucus nigra. And so it's a totally different species. And a lot of people ask us, hey, I really like lemony lace. Can I plant that to pollinate my black lace? And the answer is no, because not only are they different species, they bloom at completely different times.
Okay.
So lemony lace elderberry blooms in April for us here in Michigan. If you live in a warmer climate, it will bloom even earlier. And black lace for us blooms at the end of June. So if you don't have those flowers overlapping, you can't get any pollination.
Makes sense.
But another difference too with Sambucus racemosa, it is North American native plant. So it grows over a huge range of North America. Whereas Sambucus nigra, the black lace elderberry, is actually native to Europe. So if you're looking for a native elderberry that's a little bit different, it's such a great choice. And it's called the red elderberry, not because that foliage flushes red, but because its fruits are bright red.
Okay.
So you will need a different variety to pollinate it if fruits are what you're after. But because it does grow native so abundantly, very often most people will find that they just have enough in the wild to pollinate their lemony lace. The fruits are not edible. So the fruits on black lace are juicy. The fruits on lemony lace are really just kind of like a mealy red coating over a pit. So not a lot to eat, even if you want. So this is not one that you're going to be using for cooking or drying or anything like that. It's strictly an ornamental plant. And of course, it looks great with bulbs, but it looks great beyond that because you do have that lacy, almost, like I said, Japanese, like a cut leaf Japanese maple kind of texture. It is pretty big, so it will get to be about 7 feet tall and wide or more. It is pretty fast growing, I have found, even in, my really dry conditions. And it looks great all season. So you don't just have that one hit wonder. It really is beautiful, basically from spring until fall. It doesn't really get fall color. The leaves just kind of drop while they're still green. But when they have the red berries on there, it's just a really nice sort of extra season of interest. So it is only hardy USDA zones 3 through 7.
Okay.
So sorry to our warm climate listeners. This is not one that you are going to be able to grow. It will just burn up. And even if you try to grow it in the shade, that we've just seen over and over that elderberries just do not appreciate high humidity or very arid heat. So you can console yourself hopefully with one of the other marvelous plants that you can grow in your climate. I can't say enough good things about this plant. Have you grown it?
Same here, and I have it in my landscape, and lemony lace elderberry, if you're keeping score at home. Fabulous landscape plant, and I would say, Stacey, for me, putting plants that have a blue color in combination with it. I'm thinking lavender, nepetas. They look fabulous next to a lemony lace.
I'm glad you said that, because I actually have a Blue Fortune Agastachy in front of mine.
Perfect.
And it is a great combination. And that was another accident. So,
perfect.
I'm not above telling you all that I don't have garden design skills. I have happy accidents in my garden when things just happen to look amazing together. So if you want to get a look at lemony lace elderberry yourself, you can visit us on the web at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com or on Instagram. We'll post the plant on trial every week. And you can see it there and learn more about it and decide if you are going to add it to your garden. We're going to take a little bit of a break right now, but when we come back, we've got the mailbag. So stay tuned to the Gardening Simplified show. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. I do love helping people with their gardening conundrums.
I do too.
And quandaries, and there are plenty of them at this time of year. So if you have a question that you would like to ask us, you can always reach us at help, H-E-L-P, at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, or just visit gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and ask a question there. If you ask a question as a comment on our YouTube video, Adriana always makes sure that those get answered as she's going through them. But very often we do read some on the show as well. So don't be afraid to ask there if that's the most convenient spot for you. So what do we got in the mailbag this week?
All right, Carla is writing to us, says, "Greetings, gardener guides."
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's nice, Carla.
I have just purchased a home in mid-Michigan. I'm currently at work installing flower beds in the backyard as there were none there before. Oh, this is a great time of the year to put in a new flower bed. Maybe we can touch on that. My neighbor has a beautiful black walnut tree that hangs over my fence. What are some plants that would work with juglone in the soil? Thanks so much for your inspiration. Wow, that's a packed and loaded question. Great one, Carla.
It is. And so for those who don't know, black walnuts can secrete this chemical hormone called juglone, after their botanical name, which is juglins. And it can suppress the growth of other neighboring plants. Not all plants are sensitive to it. The plants that are sensitive to it do tend to be quite sensitive to it. And black walnuts are kind of like the epitome of this phenomenon, although there are a number of other plants that do this as well. A lot of people don't realize sunflowers also exhibit this phenomenon, which is known as allelopathy, which means sort of like having a negative effect on your neighbors.
Competition.
It's competition, right? Yeah. So they do this to make sure that nothing is growing around them and they don't have to compete with other things. But that said, the general thought on juglone in the soil is that, except for the plants that are quite sensitive, the effect is overhyped. It's not as dramatic as a lot of people think that it actually is. And when you start to dive into the science behind this, you start to find out that, again, except for those very sensitive plants, which include things like tomatoes, strawberries, I think are very sensitive. There's a list out there. And of course, I will be happy to share my extensive resources on juglone tolerance at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. But it's actually not so much the roots that cause the issue. It is primarily the fallen twigs, leaves, and especially the fruit.
Exactly. All elements of the tree have this, let's call it chemical.
Right. So it's not like there's something excreting from the roots. It really is when the leaf litter falls, when those twigs are falling. That's what you really have to watch out for. So if you can keep the area free of walnut leaves when they drop, and certainly walnut fruits, which if you can't do it, the squirrels probably will. They do an excellent job of cleaning up after walnuts. And the area is well watered, because if the plants aren't drought stressed, that also severely reduces the effect that juglone has on the plants. So I'm going to put the list out there for you. It is a long list of plants that are tolerant. The thing that I have found, though, and so often people will write to us at Proven Winners and say, hey, is this, tolerant to juglone? Can I grow this around a black walnut tree? Is no list is exhaustive.
Right.
There's a lot of good university resources out there, but really they kind of only touch on like well-known plants. They're not getting into, a great example is that people ask us often if Temple of Bloom, Heptacodium is, and it's such an unusual genus. I have found zero information out there. And it's not like we have a black walnut testing ground where we put stuff around and see how it goes. So I wouldn't want anyone to be completely limited just by what is known to be not tolerant. It's better to just avoid the sensitive plants, which are going to be on these lists that we're going to share, rather than just plan around, I know for sure that this is tolerant.
Yeah, I'll add to that list. And of course, a few weeks ago, we talked about Hypericum. We talked today about elderberry. I've found both to be tolerant around walnut trees. So there is a sizable list of things you could plant around a walnut. I am not a big fan of black walnut. I know some people like them. I think they're terribly messy. They stain the dickens out of everything. And when they start their bombing sortie on your property, they have this bitter, pungent, distinctive aroma. They nestle in your lawn, and you run over them with your lawnmower, and they become projectiles. And yes, the squirrels are very good at propagating them.
Oh, they love them.
Don't send me your cards, letters, and notes because I don't like black walnut. Now, one thing I do love in fall is preparing new beds by putting down paper, leaves, and then soil and allowing the grass to rot underneath. I think it's a great time to create kind of a passive composting thing, so to speak.
Right. And it's just cooler, so you don't have to work as hard and get all sweaty when you're trying to do it. But there are a number of resources out there. But again, the long story short here is don't take them as the gospel truth, and don't limit yourself. Okay. As long as you're watering and keeping the beds clean of that walnut foliage when it drops, you're probably going to get away with planting a lot more things than is just what is known to tolerate them.
That's good advice and encouraging. Lisa asks, hello, I have a question about Temple of Bloom. Can it be grown in a container? I bought one earlier this year. I've been amazed at how fast it's growing in my yard. I'd love to have another on my patio. I live in Zone 7. I absolutely love your show. Look forward to it every week. I have to share this with many of my gardening friends. Thank you so much. Lisa, thank you very much. And Stacey, have you seen Temple of Bloom in a container ever?
I have not, but that doesn't mean it can't grow in a container. As I think we've talked about before, almost anything can be grown in a container. The question really becomes, how is it going to perform, and what is the long-term prognosis for it? Okay. And when it comes to trees, I think that the best sort of thing that you can visualize is a bonsai plant, because those are, if they were out in the woods and had unlimited room for their roots, they would get to be huge, 65 feet tall trees. Right. Now, of course, Temple of Bloom Heptacodium, the plant that Lisa is asking us about, also known as seven sunflower, does not get that large. It sort of tops out more in the 15 to 20. So what you have to understand is if you are going to grow it in a container, that's going to have a limiting effect on it, and it will stay much smaller just as a result of its root space being restricted. And so if you're okay with that, you're not going to get as many flowers. You're not probably going to get as much of a impressive display, although, maybe you will. It just really depends on the container. But this is so important. Anything that is hardy, that can stay outdoors in your area, does need to stay outdoors in winter. Right. It needs to experience the light levels changing. It needs to experience full air circulation. And so it's important that if you are going to try this, that you are picking a container that's made of a weatherproof material, even in USDA Zone 7, where you're not going to have quite as much freeze thaw as we have, over here. You don't want clay, ceramic, anything that's going to break, because that will just expose the roots at a time, when they could really dry out, and it would kill your plant, and that would be sad. So it's possible, but just know that it's not going to be the, really magnificent specimens that you see in our photography on our website, or probably like it sounds like the one you already have. So reasonable expectations.
All right. Thanks for your question, Lisa. Appreciate it. Tony has a houseplant question. We bought a double stem fiddle leaf fig, Ficus lyrata. 2 years ago, it's been doing great. This last weekend, we transplanted it to a slightly larger pot for the first time, and since it has dropped about 5 leaves. They will turn yellow and then drop within a day or so. It gets plenty of sun, and we haven't changed any other routines or its location help. Now, of course, being a foliage plant buyer for years for a garden center, I can tell you that ficus are prone to leaf drop, and it's a means of communication. When it comes to ficus, you look at the smaller leaf ficus like Ficus benjamina. If you have it outside during summer, you move it in for winter. It's kind of like, what are you doing to me here? And it will promptly drop 50% of its leaves.
Yeah.
And then what we do is we run for the watering can and we overwater it and we speed up the cycle. So back off on the water because usually in this situation, it's either transplant shock, it's too dry, or it's too wet. Those 3 things usually I find are the reason for foliage drop on a Ficus lyrata. But again, bear in mind that with ficus, it's just a defense mechanism. They often do that. And in this case, it was transplanted.
Right. And they do not appreciate change overall.
Exactly.
But I think, my first thought here, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to houseplants, when you transplant it into a larger container, you have an increased volume of potting mix around the roots that doesn't have any roots in there to take it up. So when you water, all of a sudden there's a lot more moisture around that root ball.
Good point.
And that they don't appreciate being overwatered at all. So I think you haven't changed your routine, but I think you do need to slightly back off the water, whether that means you apply less or you're watering less frequently. I can't say because I don't know what your routine is, but I would say this is probably most likely an issue of just having too much moisture around the roots due to all that fresh soil. So if you back off, it should recover. I know it's alarming, especially on a Ficus lyrata, because those leaves drop in it. It makes a big difference.
Exactly, they're big.
But I think it will, if you back off the water and let it start to root back in, it should be okay. So,
sounds good.
So try not to be too discouraged. If you want answers, read our answers to any of these, you can visit us at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we have branching news right here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
All right, it's time for branching news here from Studio A at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. And today on branching news, I'm going to start things off with bears, those little lovable fuzzballs. We all love bears. And here's the branching news. They've moved past your bird feeder and your trash can. They're interested in something else. A week ago, a story from Anchorage, Alaska. It's the time of the year where bears are fattening up for their long winter nap, and some black bears in the last frontier must have figured donuts would help accelerate the process. So a week ago, a woman who runs a Krispy Kreme donut store in Alaska got an unusual call from her delivery driver. He was reporting that bears were in the back of his van. He could hear them breaking open the packages.
Oh my gosh.
They tried to beat on the van, but they just kept eating the donuts. They ate 20 packages of the donut holes and 6 packages of the 3-pack chocolate donuts. I don't blame them. I like chocolate donuts. As you might imagine, the experience has caused the company to plan to do things a little differently in the future. They're going to learn to slide up their ramp and close the doors to make sure that bears don't get back in there. So, of course, you got to be thinking about your bird feeder, your trash can, debris or food outside with bears, but they like Krispy Kreme donuts.
How many bears got into this delivery truck? Does it say?
2 of them.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
A mama bear and a cub.
That was not good parenting.
I know. They walked out of this van glazed and confused. They had a glazed look on their face. Yeah. So I'm surprised they didn't grab the wheel and do donuts in the parking lot with all that sugar. But they're just trying to get ready for hibernation. I just loved it. And I like Krispy Kreme donuts too. I can't blame these bears.
Well, yeah, they're opportunistic.
Yeah. So there you go. All right, we talked about bulbs today, and I wanted to bring this up. And again, of course, we did the personality quiz too. I'd like to see a Black Walnut take a personality quiz myself. But so I wanted to bring this up. One of the bulbs that we didn't talk about, when you hear people talk about naked ladies, they're not referring to the rock band. They're referring to autumn crocus, or it's also known as colchicum, and surprise lily, which is lycoris, because they emerge in the fall. So their fresh flowers are beautiful. They almost look like spring, but they emerge in the fall. So the bulbs produce clumps of leaves in spring, and you have to allow them to ripen and die and disappear. And that's important for the longevity of the plant. But then later on in the season, you get those gorgeous blooms. So if we're talking about bulbs today, we do have to refer to naked ladies. I know that a friend of mine, Professor Alan Armitage, University of Georgia, wrote a book by that title, essentially making fun of the various common names of plants. But these are two that you really want in your landscape. I find them fascinating in the landscape.
Right. And so it's similar to what I was talking about with the elderberry. They're called naked ladies because they flower without foliage. So that's where that term comes from. There's no X-rated stuff going on here. They're perfectly family-friendly flowers, and I love them both. Now, the trick, though, with the colchicum, which are such interesting plants, beautiful, is that they have to be planted in fall. So you have to actually be going to your garden center or order them online. These aren't spring planted. They're planted in fall, right before or right as they're blooming. And so a lot of people miss out on that. And I think it makes it really hard for garden centers to stock them and sell them because they are very perishable. They don't last very long. So it's worth looking up. It's a beautiful, like pink lavender color. I have seen some houses with massive plantings of them. They're gorgeous. But savvy gardeners are probably going to have to order these online or ask their local garden center if they can get them now, because now they are a little bit different than most of the other bulbs that we're talking about.
Yeah. So look for colchicum, or look for what they call surprise lily, which is lycoris, Lycoris.
And lycoris is not as hardy as colchicum. So colchicum you can easily grow here in Michigan. Lycoris, I think, is it the red one that's a little bit hardier than the pink one? I think the red one might be slightly hardier, but if you're going to try out the lycoris, definitely go near your house, someplace a little more protected.
I love your color commentary. I'm feeling like here in Studio A, we need to get swivel chairs, because I'm like grabbing my coffee mug and then looking at you answering, and then looking at Adriana, and then the camera. And
we can get you a swivel chair. We can work on that.
A swivel, an anchor chair.
As long as it doesn't get too creaky.
There's nothing worse than a creaky chair. Okay, we'll bring in some WD-40 also. I loved this story, the study, Positive Effects of Tree Diversity on Tropical Forest Restoration. It was published in Science Advances. The experiment was set up by a University of Oxford professor by the name of Andy Hector and colleagues over 20 years ago. But essentially what they found is when they were trying to reforest some of these areas, when they used a diversity of trees, up to 16 native trees, the area recovered quicker than when they planted a monoculture of one or two trees. And that's something, of course, I've always talked about in our landscapes, around our homes, in our communities. I think diversity is a very important thing. Having diversity in a tropical forest can be likened to an insurance effect, similar to having a financial strategy of diverse investment portfolios. So a diverse mix of trees can support a much wider range of animal life also. I thought that study was important and wanted to get it on our website. You can go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. We put our show notes there every week. I love the fact that over a period of 20 years, they did prove how diversity was important.
And, this, I think, does have ramifications for people in their own gardens. I mean, who wants to be stuck with just one boring plant?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
From an aesthetic standpoint, from a wildlife support standpoint, more is better. And you get to, from an aesthetic standpoint, you don't want a garden that's just like, okay, it looks really good at this moment in spring, and then I have nothing the rest of the season. You want that diversity, things that bloom at different times, things with different seasons of interest and features. So we can learn a lot from nature, as always.
Once again, reinforcement that diversity is important. All right, this from Ocean Shores, Washington, like a kid in a candy store, except a deer in a candy store. The owner of Buddy and Howie's Candy Store in Ocean Shores sent KOMO News security camera footage from inside their store, and it's a fun video to watch that shows a unique visitor perusing the shelves this weekend. The video shows a deer walking into the store through an open door, sniffs the candy, and cautiously walks around before eventually making its way out the way it came in.
It didn't eat anything?
It didn't eat anything. I watched the video. It just kind of sniffs at the taffy and checks it out and then leaves.
So we have to stop calling like hostas deer candy? Because deer don't really like candy.
Yeah, I was looking for tulips. No tulips in this store. I guess no hostas in this store. I guess I'll
just
I'll leave,
candy.
so.
Boring.
I don't know.
Imagine if the bears had gotten in there, the ones that got in the pickup, the Krispy Kreme truck.
Yes, the Krispy Kreme truck. Now that would be a party. This deer just got a little Skittle-ish. You like Skittles?
They're okay.
I don't like those things.
They're not my favorite, but they're all right.
Adriana? Yeah, same here. I don't know. Not that it's important, but all right. Let's see. As the annual fall migration begins across the northern hemisphere, apps like Merlin, which is put out by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, have caught on among birders and non-birders alike by revealing just how crowded with species our surrounding areas are. Now, I'm assuming you probably have that app, Stacey. I don't know if you do. I have it
sure
on
do.
my phone.
Love it. Probably the app I use the most.
Yeah, so it's, something really useful. And here's the cool thing is that the app is free.
Amazing. It's such a resource that they've given us, yeah.
So kudos to Cornell University and making this app available. Again, if you were to look for it in the App Store, just look for Merlin, Merlin, and you can add that to your phone, especially as we get into the annual fall migration. Just a recommendation.
Highly recommended.
You bet. All right. Well, thank you so very much for tuning in the Gardening Simplified show. Look for us on Instagram. Look for us on YouTube. Thanks for downloading the podcast, listening on radio, and thanks to you, Stacey.
And thanks to you, Rick. And of course, thanks to Adriana. And thanks to all of our listeners. Have a great week ahead.